Hi, folks. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
We have a relatively small group, but I think with Marcus, myself, and Kiki, we have quorum.
Yes, that's correct.
Even so, maybe we'll give it a minute or two before we jump into everything. 2 minutes, I say. I would say 3:03. Let's get going. And hi, Kiki. And hi, Kimmy.
Hi. How's it going?
Hi, Emil.
Hi, everyone.
I'm glad that today looks like schedule-wise is maybe a little bit better.
Yes, educators, summer break.
Hi, Jill. Welcome.
Hi there.
We were just giving it until 3:03, and there we are to get going with our agenda because we do have quorum. And if others will be joining us, then fabulous. But in the meantime, we'll take action on the things that we can. So, hi again, everyone. I'm Jeff Landau. I'm a steering committee member of the Contra Costa County Racial Justice Coalition. I'm also a public defender in Contra Costa. And I'm here today as chair of the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee of the Contra Costa County Racial Justice Oversight Body. And Kiki Ferris, Probation, and Marcus Walton with Office of Education are also on the subcommittee with me. And maybe we'll just take the moment to say hi and introduce ourselves. We all, I think, have had the chance to at least communicate. Kimmy, I'm wondering if everyone on the group has yet, but otherwise, I'll say, hey, folks. And what else? What could I be adding? I'm like thinking of a nice prompt sort of thing. Have you been outside yet today? And if not, are you intending to go outside? How's that? And yes, I did go outside and I ate lunch outside today. So let me hand it over to Kiki.
Good afternoon. I am Kiki Ferris, a probation manager, specifically responsible for prevention, all things foster care, as well as juvenile and adult investigations in our county. And I sit as the chief's proxy on this subcommittee. And yes, I have been outside. I'm working from home and I have 2 brand new pit bull babies that are just like having newborns all over again. So I try to go outside often, or else you know what happens.
That gives you right, it keeps you accountable. You got to go outside for sure. We got to see those pit bulls on camera at some point. Okay, let me hand over to Marcus.
Good afternoon, Marcus Walton, Director of Communications here at the Contra Costa County Office of Education, representing Superintendent of Schools Lynn Mackey. And yes, I've been outside. Today was our, we have an employee organization and today was sports day, hence the football jersey. So we went outside and they cooked burgers and we were able to interact with each other without masks for the most part. So that was good.
Outside event, that's a nice thing that when it can be possible, that's great. Glad you're here as regular, just that we're here together is what I mean to say. And let me invite Emil to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Imalol. I'm a Bay Area educator for many years and the mama of a young biracial man who's currently incarcerated in Contra Costa County. And I have been outside at the treat of walking around a neighborhood and watching life happen. I'll pass it to you, Jill.
Right on. Thanks, Emil.
You want me to go? Jill Ray, the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson, and I have been outside between meetings briefly today. So
It's important. I'm glad we're almost, what are we? 5 for 5 at this point. Kimmy, let me hand to you. How's it going?
Hello, everybody. I'm Kimmy. I work for the Office of Reentry and Justice. I'm a plenary evaluator. I have not been outside other than walking to my car this morning. I'm actually going to make up for it, though, because I'm going on vacation starting tomorrow or after work today. I'll be in Hawaii for like a week, so I'll more than make up for not leaving the office today.
All right, well then I won't give you a hard time about it today. That sounds terrific. Hi, Kimmy. And let me also invite Amy Price to introduce, say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Price. I'm with the Zellerbeck Family Foundation, and I'm just checking in to learn more about what's going on with this body. And I came in a couple minutes late, so I apologize, but I think I got the gist of the question, which, yes, I walk my dogs every morning, and I just came in from eating a very late lunch outside. So thanks.
Terrific. All right, so Kimmy, with the asterisk, all of us have been outside just a little bit, and you're going to be making up for it. So, okay, terrific. And glad you're with us, Amy. So let's, maybe I will take the one little moment to go through a little bit of the history. I had added into our built-in agenda having welcome introduction and announcements. We would have a little bit more on just, wait a second, who are we? How did we get here? Intended for anyone who's coming to us without having been in a previous meeting. And Kimmy, I don't know if this is the first subcommittee you've had. You certainly have an introduction to, and Amy, you may have also had some introduction to us, but I'll just say, at the risk of being maybe a little redundant, that we're coming here as a follow-up on the initial process of having the Contra Costa County Racial Justice Task Force. And that was a similar composition in the sense of having community representatives, non-departmental individuals, and or orgs that were represented, community-based orgs, and then also having traditional stakeholders, sheriff, district attorney, probation, public defender, law enforcement agencies. We have education here, of course, as well as other relevant actors or actors that could be taking action related to criminal justice reforms in adult and juvenile systems, and then even more broadly, what factors are leading to significant racial disparities in our own local county system. And that can then expand to different educational and other services that we're going to be working to reduce the persistent disparities that are there. And through that long process of initially building, it was a community effort that led to the Racial Justice Task Force coming into its existence and was ultimately voted upon and unanimously agreed to by the supervisors, or voted to create that task force. And then that process of actually hammering out what would be the recommendations for action there took, I want to say, 18 months plus. Hi, Cheryl, welcome. Another member of the oversight body.
Hola.
Glad you're here. And if you want to take the moment to introduce course, I know you and many of us, nearly everyone on call does, but maybe not everyone. If you may also be in another meeting.
No, I'm actually in DC and I just finished meetings. So yeah. Hello everyone.
Hi. Fellow steering committee member,
Yes.
Racial Justice Coalition. And that following voting and education from all those different stakeholders in the task force process, there came recommendations, and those recommendations were presented to the supervisors. Supervisors voted upon and approved the vast majority of those recommendations, which then came back to create this group, the oversight body, which is the next iteration to make sure that those recommendations are implemented. And we're doing our little piece of that in our subcommittee of the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee, which is one of 3 existing subcommittees, the diversion, data, and our Community Engagement and Funding Group. And what our actions are, path of what we're doing is informed by, and largely consists of these specific recommendations that were approved through that first phase of the task force. And it's also, by the nature of our community engagement aspect, as well as the whole oversight body, we're continuing to receive input and can modify our work plan accordingly based on what we're hearing from community as priorities. So long wind up, and I'll also say that just where you can find this agenda, which is being shared, and Kimmy, thank you for sharing, also background on the history through the county's website is there. So having gone through that just a little bit, let me ask if anyone has any introductions, or excuse me, any announcements from actually our other subcommittee members before I ask for public comment. And if there's not at this moment, let me open up to, or Jill, was there something, please? Yes.
I just wanted to announce, in case anybody wasn't aware, that the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, the planning process for that is holding community cafes. The first one was earlier this week. There's a second one tonight, and then there's 2 more after this that are scheduled to discuss the outcomes of the survey that they did and kind of more discussion on what the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice should look like. And it's creating a whole different structure aside from this one. And I think the hope was that this one could be landed inside of that, be part of it. And I'm not sure it's going to end up being that way, but we'll see. Not from the recommendations, it doesn't look like it. So if anybody hasn't had a chance to participate, I will send over. Can I send it to you, Kimmy? And will you send it out to the group?
Yeah, that's
Was I muted that whole time or not?
No, I heard you.
Okay, so I just got muted. So I can send it to you, Kimmy, and then you can send it out to the group in case anybody hasn't seen those invitations. There's 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you for raising that, Jill. Thank you for raising that, Jill. I think that sounds like certainly a relevant opportunity for us, regardless of how things end up going. If we end up getting included into this new model or don't, it'll have implications for how we move forward. Maybe I could just ask, in that I have not yet been able to participate, was there discussion you were indicating, and maybe current input is suggesting this oversight body wouldn't be included in that new office? Was there some discussion of a plan B or an alternate?
No, so immediately after the meeting, I sent an email to Paul Race and just said, you might, if you haven't participated, you might want to, number 1, listen in, and number 2, think about next steps, because we were really, the way that they're looking to set up this office, and this is just the recommendations from that core group. The Board of Supervisors will ultimately decide, but the way they're setting it up will create the exact same data issues that the RJOB is facing. They're hoping to have an outside group, which we all know that once you have an outside group, you can't share data across systems. So I don't know what the end result will be, but I think the input maybe from members of the RJOB in those meetings to share some of the challenges you all have had might be helpful, rather than it just coming from me.
Well, thank you, Jill. I'm glad that you're bringing it to the group. And as I was saying, whether we're included in that new office or not, well, we will have some impact. So would be good for us to be able to weigh in to the extent that anyone has their feeling on whether we ought to be. I mean, maybe just as you brought that up, does anyone in this group, in this space now want to speak to whether you feel like it does make sense?
I would just also add that they're suggesting that an advisory body be created under the ORESJ. And I suggested that we have one, and maybe it could be adapted and expanded to include some of the effort, since much of it is the same. And some people in the group felt like this was more criminal justice related versus across the board. And Jeff, you would know from the Racial Justice Task Force, I think the recommendations were broader than just criminal justice. So
absolutely. You're right. And the concept being that those things they're going to try to ultimately have reduction in the disparities, and that can be across the board, as you're saying, those different factors that are going to influence the changes we want to see. So yes, and thank you, Kimmy, for agreeing to share that out. Amy, did I see your hand before for public comment? No.
Nope.
Got it. And Cheryl, I see your hand.
Yes, I do think it's important that there's some voice from the body that's not emotionally tied. My experience with the core group and going to a lot of those meetings, it tends to be a little too kumbaya for me. And you guys already know I don't have the ability to bite my tongue, and the fact that I'm in DC makes it even worse. I spent all week in legislative meetings, and I still have one more day to go tomorrow. But it seems to be too kumbaya. It's too much hand holding and music singing and not enough focus on actual equity work. So I think that's we tend to, even if we don't always agree and walk lockstep, we do tend to get to the root of the work in what we do here. And I think they could use some of that in the old RESJ. And I'm not here for another, wearing beads and singing songs kind of committee. So I think that we owe it to our community to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for impacted people. And that does not mean, soft pedaling and, holding hands and burning candles and incense. Sorry if I put it that way, but I think you guys understand what I mean.
I think I do understand, Cheryl. So thank you for sharing your perspective on, as always. Let me say then, it sounds like we do need to have our input there, again, to be making sure that whatever's happening is going to be impactful and authentic to what you were speaking to, Cheryl. Let me also just say that I saw in the chat, and I don't know if we did directly address that. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Jill, just as I was saying. And you've answered it there in the chat. So we'll be virtual, and got it. Folks can get the further details in the chat there. All right, any additional public comment? Not seeing at this moment, then let me move to approval of the record of actions. That's the next agenda item. Perfect. We'll look for that email from Kimmy. Thank you. So this is on starting at page 4 of 36, our agenda packet, and let's just take a second together to go through. Of course, we all did read this in detail before, but also to just keep our memory of it fresh. Those that were here are marked as being here. I love that we do have the video connection to be able to give the further detail beyond the written descriptions, which are also very helpful, and continue to appreciate having that as a guide for those who are coming in and wanting to see where to look to begin in the conversation. Okay, so having just about rolled through, not yet, we're there, we're taking time, which is good. As we're going through, I'll ask if anyone has any proposed changes. All right, and if not, then is there any public comment on the record of actions before we take a vote? All right, not seeing any, then does anyone have a motion to approve the record of actions from last time?
So move.
Thank you, Marcus. And a second?
I can second.
Thanks, Kiki. Okay. Any further discussion on this item before we call the vote? Being none, then Kimmy, would you please call our roll vote?
Sure. Jeff,
Yes.
Kiki,
Yes.
and Marcus.
Yes.
And
There you are.
Chris.
Done. Thanks, Kimmy. Unanimous. Okay. Moving right along. Now we are coming to agenda item 4, standing agenda item on JJCC updates the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. Important overlap and the need to have communication regularly. It just kept to be so often with these meetings that we felt like, let's just have a standing agenda item that we build in space for this because we need to know what's happening there. And I turn in these meetings to you, Kiki. So is there anything, did you have update for this group?
No, only because, you know, the prevention, intervention, and community engagement subcommittee has altered its schedule. So now it's every other month. And we met in this group, I think just 2 or 3 days after the last meeting in June. And so PICE will meet again on August 1st.
Thanks, Kiki. So by the nature of just what you were saying and got the update since the last meeting, there's little to add, at least it seems like from our own subcommittee today. Does anyone have anything from either other subcommittee members, or I'll just open out a public comment, anything to chime in about or give input about the JJCC? Okay. Not seeing at this moment, then I will have us move on to our next agenda item, which is consider changing meeting time to accommodate community participation. And I think, Emilul, you had raised this issue last time, and we didn't have it on our agenda. And everyone was feeling, I think, my memory, that it was worthy of our taking up and just at least having discussion and some consideration on how we're making the decision, and is that based on input from the relevant stakeholders. And this time, clearly during the workday, the business workday makes it a restriction for those that are working during those hours. And I think you've all had the experience, or nearly those that have been at these meetings, that I've had interruption, trial schedule, things like that. Plus, I know Emily, it's been difficult or impossible to be able to participate regularly during the school day, given your work. So, and that's something that we certainly have addressed when we're talking about our community forums and having public participation in our listening sessions and or community forums, and the importance of having those outside of the workday for the exact same reasons, really, that you're going to be restricting your input to those that aren't working during those hours. Of course, there are demands, childcare and otherwise, after the workday, but still it has more possibility in general, I'd say, for broad participation. And before I stop talking, I guess I'd say that this is a hybrid group, right? This isn't just community-based orgs or individuals non-departmental. Part of the nature is that we do have sheriff and probation and Office of Education, et cetera, at the table and participating in this so that real action can be taken and we're not merely from the outside making requests, but that's including those departments that can choose to take action in the meantime, as well as make a powerful statement to the supervisor. So if we're realistically going to have these departments present and regularly, it may not be realistic that it'll happen outside of business hours. Enough of me giving my intro to this. Let me invite Emily, if you have thoughts that you wanted to share on this, in my memory being that you had brought it to us initially.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate being on the agenda. I mean, I guess really there were three different reasons or components to me bringing up the issue. One, it was my own uncertainty as to whether or not this body is attempting to engage the community to participate in the body itself, or whether or not the intent of this subcommittee is not to get the community involved in these discussions, but in the larger discussions and the goals of the RJOB. If the hope is that the public is actually engaged in these meetings, I just brought up the issue because I have been attending all the RJOB subcommittee meetings for over a year now, and I am often the one of just a couple people of the public in the virtual room. So I just thought it merited bringing that up. And if the goal is not to get the public involved in these subcommittee meetings, maybe it's not doesn't merit further discussion. But if we do want the public involved in these meetings, I just thought either if the meeting time cannot be changed, then maybe advertising these meetings to some degree. That's not happening. And I don't live in Contra Costa, but I've only become aware it was through kind of some pretty thorough investigation on county websites to figure out how these meetings even happen. So if we truly want the public in these conversations, I think we really need to get out there and blast the public about these meetings happening so that they can come to the table. And the great thing is that they're still virtual, so I can attend during my lunch break from San Francisco. And I'm sure there are many other people, as long as they're virtual, who can jump on and share their perspective. And so, yeah, I guess maybe we don't want the public involved in this subcommittee, but if we do, maybe the time cannot be changed. You know, it's not even worth surveying the public to see what time would be more amenable to people's schedules. But if we can't do that, at least I think we can advertise the meetings more effectively if we want people here.
Thank you for that input and giving more background on this and the reasons why you shared it with us. I have my thoughts, but let me just, before I start responding back, invite anyone else from subcommittee if they want to speak on this point of really, I guess, those primary points that Imalo was talking about. Is this somewhere where we want to have robust public participation at these subcommittee meetings? And if we do, what are our thoughts about changing time? And also, if not that, and also different outreach, expanded outreach to have more opportunity for people to take part in subcommittee. Does anyone have thoughts that they want to share on that before I start my thoughts? Or, right. Let me just give it a second with there.
I don't know that my thoughts are helpful, but I'll just say, I think, in large part, because I'm a member of a number of subcommittees that are open to the public, of course, we want public participation because as our agencies, in my opinion, are actually a part of the community and not separate from it, we also want community members that are, parts of the public and other agencies as well. That being said, I don't have any objection to changing the meeting or anything of the sort. The only thing that I would just mention is that many of us are also parts of other subcommittees, and I know that it's been really difficult to get quorum and attendance by people who are mandatory parts of these subcommittees that and time them in such a way that they don't interfere with other scheduled meetings. So I just want to acknowledge that I have experienced in this group and others, the difficulty of getting us all together. I don't know how we would come to a conclusion about what's better for the public to attend, anyway, because I guess it's kind of up in the air. We could change the meeting time and then kind of, make sure that it gets promoted and then kind of see who shows up. But ultimately I'm open to whatever will make it easiest for everyone else, because I too have been attending this meeting very faithfully for a long time. And just whatever makes it easiest for the mass, possibilities of participation is fine with me.
Thanks, Kiki. I appreciate you sharing your input. Jill, I see your hand.
Just from a different perspective, understanding with this being a hybrid meeting, meaning that we have both community members and county employees on it. When the county employees all have their work day, and then we're asking them to attend a meeting in the evening, which is basically on their own time. So keeping that in mind, because oftentimes the employees don't get to shorten their workday if they have an evening meeting, even if it's a commitment of the job. We all have our, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever we're working. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Also, I have seen other advisory bodies. So a lot of advisory bodies that are just community members meet in the evenings, and then they have a staff support. But the more hybrid that have both community and county employees tend to be more during the workday or at the end of the workday, so that it's just a small overlap, because it's really challenging after you've worked your 8-hour day to then commit another 2 hours to meetings after that. Just, enjoying life as a family member as well. And I have to just to be clear, this has nothing to do with my schedule, because my schedule, I don't have a workday hour. I'm just talking about our more of our union employees who do. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I've seen other advisory bodies that have this sort of hybrid group that have tried shifting it later to see about public participation, and it hasn't benefited. There hasn't been an increased public participation adjusting to the meetings later. So, and I can understand the main body, the RJOB, the whole body maybe doing a little bit later for more public participation, but not necessarily the subcommittees.
Thank you also for sharing input, Jay. Sorry, Jill. So yes, I'm going to hold off, and I see Cheryl's hand. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I'm glad Jill said it because honestly, that's what was in my mind and my thoughts. For brevity's sake, I'm not going to repeat too much of it, but we do have to consider that and keep that in mind. There's, some of these positions are mandated by the county. It's people who have been told that they need to attend meetings. So, when people are told they need to attend meetings as part of their job or their position, having them, work a full day and then being told that they have to give up their evening is a different thing than people who are volunteering. Many of us, I know, we're volunteering as part of what we do. And we do what we do. And yeah, I work a full-time job too during the day. And I do this because I do it. But I don't have a strong desire to mandate that people, that we hold other people to doing it. I'd rather see people being there because they want to be there after their work hours. But the other side of that is that, and Jeff, you know this, we've had evening meetings. And unless we're prepared, especially to feed people when they get off work and to have some childcare and some other things ready for them, it doesn't work. And I've just dealt with these last night at a different meeting. We get into a whole different set of concerns for people. I think we have to find a different way, especially because this is community engagement, to figure out how much of the community is really interested in coming to steady meetings every month, because they don't. There's so many meetings, rather than a town hall meeting or not even a town hall, a listening meeting where we're actually listening to community. I think this committee is really to figure out the how to get the community engaged. I don't think this was meant to be a community meeting where a committee where community comes to every meeting. This is a committee that was established to figure out how do we get the community engaged and then put on events for the community to participate. That's just my take. It's not written anywhere. Don't nobody hold me to it. Don't put this in writing somewhere. I know we'll be recorded, but so I'm going to say that disclaimer. But I do think that you're not going to get the community participating at a level that you would if it was an actual event being held where they're buying into it and the community knows it is being held for them. Because too many of them are working from day to day, including many of us, where we're on work time right now. I know I am, and I know most of the county personnel are. So we do have to keep that in mind, whether it's from 3 to 4:30 or 1 to 5 or 4 to 5:30. We're going to run into the same problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate you sharing. Marcus, I did see your hand before. Was there something you did want to speak to? Okay. And Emily, I see your hand. Let me just quickly chime in on some of my thoughts on the first round, if that's okay, and then we'll invite you to speak also. That, yeah, Cheryl, what you were saying in that last part, I don't totally see this space as let's bring everybody with the intention of let's make sure everybody turns out for this, in the sense that I could get onto a longer philosophical thing, but I guess I'd say even if the time is convenient, it's the uncommon person who shows up regularly as you do in the LOL, and for those of us that choose to participate in this regularly. And yeah, I mean, I think for myself at least, you need to have either been hurt by the system or someone close to you to really feel like you want to, it matters, I need to show up, I'm going to keep showing up. So this is not a surface level participation group, because if you want immediate changes and you're like, shut this jail down right now, well, this is going to be a very snail's pace, right? Because we're an advisory group that's going to go to the people that actually could make the call. And even then, that'll be a big ask for them to do. But I mean, at the baseline of the sense that people want to show up, I think generally for a meeting where they feel like, can you guys even do anything? What can you do? And for a general group, and having the sense of this is an advisory group and I think it's worth our involvement in it. But you need to be regularly showing up and having the understanding of all the background to have any chance of real action in this and not get stymied by, now we need to move on to this new project or topic. I mean, it is essential that we are informed by not just these voices and that we're representative of groups. And I think that's why it partly is important that we don't just have institutional actors and not, you know, that public defender wouldn't qualify either as saying, well, that's a community voice. It's still an agency voice, and to have folks like Cheryl and myself sitting in a different space, but maybe I'm not the best example. If you think the other representatives of the Racial Justice Coalition that are sitting as members, they're not just speaking without being advised of their own community orgs. Long answer, but I guess I share with Cheryl that I'm not sure the intention is massive participation here, really only targeted at those folks that are serious about the long haul and involvement and understanding what this process is, while certainly being open to everyone. And in terms of how it could be shared, because there are more people than just those that are on the call, even if we're rare and caring about this stuff. So what ways can be more effective in doing that? I probably would think additional social media beyond what we do. So let me leave it at that and invite Emil your feedback.
Thanks, you guys, for taking the time to discuss this. And I realize institutional change is a slow-moving beast. That's why I've committed to being here. And I know that changing the time is like a domino effect. That was, I didn't think, a likely remedy. And I hear, I guess, that at least two people on the committee feel that this is not, the goal is not really to have a large number of the public to be here, which I guess to me then makes me kind of wonder, well, why are there so many times do we pause for public comment? Maybe that's just, you know, legally mandated by the county. But I understand that sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, is not a good thing. But if we do want more public members here, I do feel that there could just be some outreach to the public to get them here, and we changing the meeting time, you know, beyond union hours. That doesn't even have to be considered. But I do feel like if we want the public here, we could get the public here, definitely, since these meetings are happening via Zoom. But in any case, I am just an outsider, so I appreciate being here, and I appreciate that you guys took time to consider my agenda item.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emil. I think it is a technical legal requirement, and I see it as more than just a token thing. So this is appropriate to take the time and discuss. Marcus, I saw your hand, and then Amy.
I just wanted to weigh in. It's that I agree we can probably do a little more outreach to let people know. I agree with everyone else that maybe this isn't the necessarily the space for huge public interaction and input and feedback. Obviously, we do need to hear from the public and from people who are interested in the work that's being done in the subcommittee. However, and this is not, this is not unique to this subcommittee. Unless someone is engaged in an issue, we don't show up to meetings in this democracy. We don't. And from school board to board of supervisors to what have you, unless you are engaged, basically unless you're enraged about an issue, we don't seem to engage in that process until such time as we find something that impacts us directly. So while I agree we can do more to make sure that those who are interested and who do want to engage with us at this level are aware, I don't know that putting a lot of energy and effort into trying to get more people to come is going to work. I believe that Cheryl mentioned even when you provide food and childcare and other things, you still have, unless there is a real immediate need, you're not going to get the kind of feedback or the kind of participation that some might want to see. So while I agree we can do more, I would not put a lot of effort into trying to get the perfect time or change times and do more to bring people, because I don't believe, and I could be wrong, could absolutely be wrong. We could do some things and see a lot more participation, and there could be an outpouring of desire to attend this meeting. But I just, in my experience, that's not going to happen unless there are issues that speak directly to what someone is going through almost at that moment and an immediate need. So my 2 cents, again, we should possibly do more to let folks know about the meeting, but the other strategies, I would say, let's hold off until we see that there's really a desire for more people to attend.
Thanks for your feedback and input also, Marcus. I know I have some additional thoughts now, and I'm going to hold off because I see Amy's hand before I talk further.
So hesitant to speak because I've only attended this meeting 1 or 2 other times, but I feel I am listening to this, and I also sit in a lot of other meetings in various counties, and so one thing I'm hearing, well, so let me just say, first of all, that I don't think from my experience that changing the time of a meeting is going to get people there unless, one, as others have expressed, they feel like there's a reason for them to be there. 2, that they feel like it's a safe place where they can express their views and that their views will be heard and that their views mean something. And so I think that changing time doesn't compel people to come. I think that they need to understand what this is, what their voice would mean, how, there are a lot of people that are enraged about a lot of things. And I don't know that most people understand the various avenues to express that concern in a productive way. And so I think the only thing that is sitting kind of funny with me on this is, if this is a community engagement subcommittee, I don't know how that a group decides how best to engage the community without the community's voice involved. And so that's the only thing that's sitting kind of funny for me. And I do think, just, as disclosure, we have been, funding in Contra Costa County. We're doing a lot deeper engagement. And so part of my reason for coming to these meetings when I can is just to learn more about the many different meetings and the different coalitions and the different processes. And the one other thing I will say is what I have seen. So I've been in meetings and, oh shoot. Something just happened.
We're still hearing you on our end.
Oh, that's so weird. My screen just went black, and so I can't see anyone. So I will keep talking. So I've been in meetings in Alameda County where there are, hundreds of people, community members there speaking in the middle of the day. And what I've seen is that there are groups organizing them and interfacing between, these committees and community members to help them understand what the opportunities are and how to engage in these meetings. And so I think that So I'll just leave it at that as I try to figure out why my screen just went black. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate your input also. And it's never too early to be giving input, so it's welcome. Right. And Cheryl, I see your hand too. I was thinking of, and I'm also now thinking as I'm incorporating what Amy was adding, that there is the more of a positive can-do spin on this. I mean, if I'm thinking, okay, now I'm at racial justice coalition meetings, that is really where I think that's the entry point. If you want to have the conversations about like, let's really be completely direct and real about what we want to be having and not political anything, and how are we going to get this stuff done, and clear back and forth and not the formality, then come to our coalition meetings and or come to the Immigrant Rights Alliance meetings, because these are in a way filtrations and representative of those other spaces where advocates are there, and that I'm supposed to be informed by, and Cheryl's supposed to be informed by, those spaces where we can talk a little bit more freely without having to go through the minutes. And we must have the different votes in the public comment, because now this is formal and it's a place where it actually can have more action. But if I was starting off by saying, if I think of like my organizer mindset, then I would say, all right, how many to each person here, right? How many people can you commit to be at the meeting next time? So when you start having that direct accountability, then you get more people at the meeting, right? Or at least how many people are you going to reach out to? Can we all commit to 10 and we all say that out loud and we will do it? Then more people will show, because right, lots and lots and lots of people are constantly hurt by these systems and are in terrible pain, for sure. Not everyone is ready, wanting to, able to interface in this way, but there's more than the people on this call. So that's point taken. And also to Amy, what you're saying, I mean, right, there's a little bit more than just seeming like superficial hypocrisy and being called the community engagement and funding group and not particularly caring about having robust community engagement. True, but I mean, I would say it's important that this subcommittee was and continues to have as part of its work planning these community forums, which are more of a quarterly type or half year type informative, again, beyond like our coalition meetings and other non-county official spaces where you can tap in. And now I can be influenced by and say at these meetings, you know, I heard at our coalition meeting, folks were saying this, and I can now raise it in this space. But also that should be part of what we do, is have a concentrated time where we're really going to have outreach and devote that time to input and not just put it into a tiny piece of a meeting where we're going to be touching on other campaigns. So yes, robust community engagement is important, and it's knowing how to channel it here. So not just saying, I mean, I don't want the tenor of it to be like, we're doing everything we can, more won't really help. And that's not our focus really anyway, because none of that's a fair gloss on it, right? More can be done. There are people who are informed and whose voices are not here when perhaps certainly more could be, and maybe a lot more could be. And we do need to have the community engagement and different voices at each point, every step of the way, not just at the meetings where we can repeat the phrase from another person or everyone shows up en masse. It's important at every single stage. So that is worthy of recognition. Enough me speaking. Cheryl?
No, I'm glad you spoke before me, because they put great context to it. And going back to what we said earlier, I know it's hard to people to understand. I think it's important that people have context to how these committees were formed and to read the charge of the subcommittees, because I think that that's important, and maybe that needs to be printed on the agenda, what the subcommittees are here for, because it may be helpful. I know Miss Amy said that she's new to these, because that may be helpful. to know what the CEF subcommittee role is and what the responsibility is supposed to be for, because I think that will help contextualize it for everybody. Going back to what Jeff just said, yes, show up at the Racial Justice Oversight, Racial Justice Coalition meeting, show up at the CREC meeting, the stand up Contra Costa meetings, that the meetings that some of us who are community representatives, the organizations that we are representing, and that will help put that into context. The other thing is that when we're talking about these meetings and what you said about Oakland, I go to a lot of meetings in Alameda County, Contra Costa, in Solano County, because I work in Alameda County, and I sit on the phone sometimes for hours to be able to take public comment. I just did this a couple of days ago regarding the Oakland Coliseum and the port matter. But I have that privilege of being able to do that because I manage my team from remote. Not everybody does. And so the people who you see on those phones have a certain privilege to be able to do that. Work remote, not work at all, work a different kind of job. It's not necessarily the kind of a holistic feedback you're going to get in this kind of space. So you still are living out a certain portion of the community that is impacted by the people who need to be in this space. When we reach out and we have whether it's a community town hall or listening session or anything else. So it's still not capturing the full voice of the community. When you have a meeting, because we get these complaints all the time. Jeff and I have been dealing with this for 7-8 years now with the Racial Justice Coalition. When we have an argument already that's coming up with the Truth Act Forum being held in the middle of the day. When the county holds it in the middle of the day and people can't call in or people can't attend. So having meetings at 10 o'clock in the daytime, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it never works. And we have people complaining about it, but also having it at 5 p.m. when people have had to work all day, we get a complaint about it. So what I'm saying to you is we've had these conversations, especially at Racial Justice Coalition. We have these conversations and we have battling factions over whose time frame will work, and we try and work it out for the best. But when it comes to a subcommittee, the work has to be done in the subcommittee in order to even get to the event itself. You don't have the community battle in the subcommittee forum. The subcommittee forum is for the people who sit on the oversight body to work out what the recommendations are going to be to give to the oversight body to work on. That's the structure. So the subcommittee figures out, okay, what do we need to do? What recommendations do we make? And then we take those recommendations and we send them over to the larger body. And then the voting takes place there. And yes, you want community voice, the community that can be here and is committed to be here. But as Jeff said, it's very hard when you only come every once in a while and you don't know the context of some of the decisions that are made or the conversations that are being had. And you come in and you only have half of the story or only a piece of the puzzle, and you're trying to put it together and you don't understand it. So that's hard, at least you're going to commit to being here. You miss one meeting, you could be just lost. I'm just being honest with you. And not many people are going to commit to reading the notes and to being here all the time. So, thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. So, yes, and right, like all of these things, I want to take the parts of it of saying we're acknowledging that this isn't everyone turn out for the meeting, for this specific meeting, and we have room to grow and could have a diversity of voices, and we haven't maxed out those persons that can give input, and even just one or two voices in a space where there's only 10 on the call or whatever it may be can really influence what happens. So it's a position worth having in that way. And it can encourage people that, like, if people are going to hear your comment, it's not like you're going to be one among 500 people. So let me then leave this, unless anyone else has comment on this item, to say, I am going to encourage each of us, and I won't ask to unmute because it's not exactly that space, but let's all reach out to 2 people and commit to bringing 1 to come to the meeting, right? And we'll do what we do. But I know people that I could invite to be here and say, actually, it is pretty cool. You should check it out. We've been working on these projects and you're interested in this youth advisory thing. I know you would be. Or the capacity fund. This really has a chance to be something, and your voice should be part of the discussion. There is, for all the reasons we were just talking about. We have room for expanded discussion at this subcommittee meeting. So let's reach out to 2 people and commit. I'm saying it, and you don't have to vote on it, right? I'm just, by fiat as chair, I say, well, I'll commit to bring 1 additional person at the meeting, and then we'll have more people than we do today, and we'll have more input. So I leave it there. Yes.
Yeah. Can
please.
we just, even more than that, can we just commit to just, I think one of the easiest thing is just to cross promote the meeting. Like some of us have newsletters, some of us have, you know, the email boards, the e-boards, and we can just cross promote the meetings to our
Yes.
e-list. And I think that that's one of the easiest things to do, right? To let people, make
Yes, it
people
is.
aware rather than having to go find it on the website. We can send it out to our list. And encourage people that way.
Right. And if you're feeling any sort of way about it, you can say, you know, I wasn't going to do it, but they said at the subcommittee we were going to do it. So I had to send it out to everyone. Okay, excellent. We have the room to do it, and with the reasons why. Thank you. I think this is worthy of our taking the time. It has more than just time and date. It also has to do with why are we here? What's our intention? And so that's always worthy of some discussion. And I think it was time well spent, at least from my perspective. Okay, moving ahead to consider the model for community capacity fund. And we have program overview, which you see that link that's embedded. This is agenda item 6. And then a summary report and our community capacity fund guidelines. I'll also just flag that we have 25 minutes remaining in our meeting. So we're just budgeting time in our discussion, knowing if anyone feels like there is something that they're waiting until the end, that there'll be limited time to do that. And as has been the case with previous meetings, being pretty loose with open to people presenting public comment or an announcement, even though it's not at the precise moment on the agenda, to just facilitate folks down. Like, you know, I was waiting for the right time and it wasn't there, so I didn't say anything. Encourage you to raise your hand and say something if you feel like we didn't end up talking about it and there's a moment where you'd like to. So let's stay with this then. And perhaps go first to page 36 is what I'm thinking. And remember where we were with our capacity fund guidelines. That's attachment 3, so the very last page of this packet. And reorienting all of us on where we were with this is that we've received presentation and looked at other materials from Jewel Legacy Group, as well as a couple other sources at least. to inform what we might do here, and ultimately decided, and in our last meeting looked at a related capacity fund model that was in Contra Costa County. And as a comparison, we ultimately decided through our vote, which we then presented to the full oversight body, which voted upon its approval of our moving forward. These are still recommendations to the Board of Supervisors that has the power, but in terms of our process, the oversight body, we talked about having a two-phase model where it was going to be a larger number of grantees, persons that would be orgs, or persons that would be applying for and getting funding and technical assistance at a more shallow level or a less deep intensive level. Then would be a later phase, but more people involved, so necessarily would have to be a little bit less intensive, and the money would likely be less at that first phase. And for those that are going through that first phase and demonstrating greater capacity and the factors that would be ironed out later, to be a smaller number of grantees at the second phase that would have further technical assistance and funding. And we want this to be open to new and existing, new and kind of more established orgs to be participating in the initiative. We have fund, but we're also thinking about this more broadly than just money and technical assistance. So for that's background, right, to where we are. And now we're in the process of trying to move the ball forward of saying, I'll finally just take one last historical note to say, and we requested the full oversight body to approve our subcommittee request for additional funding and technical assistance, just to put together a RFP, basically how are we going to get this to the next phase, because we've got a model, we've got something that we're interested in doing, but it'll be a lift to turn this concept into something that in fact could get on the ground and rolled out as, now we're going to have the first grantees and we're going to have the technical assistance happening. What would it look like to actually get the different service providers there, or technical assistance providers in place, and the funding to do that, and what will actually the criteria be? And we're going to need to have some additional assistance, and part of this falls into our very first discussion that Jill was bringing about, where will the oversight body land, this group land, in terms of having technical assistance ourselves. So that's background. And we're looking at local models to the best we can in the meantime to move forward, because we don't yet have additional bandwidth, additional technical assistance or funding to turn this process into, or this one-pager guidelines draft into a many detailed page document that would be allowing launch of the program. So that's introduction. Does anyone have comments, other feedback before I would move ahead to looking at the documents that are not our guideline draft, but are also references to the attachments? Does anyone want to give any input on this, or should I just keep rolling ahead? Hearing nothing, I'll keep rolling ahead. Again, feel free to chime in and raise hand, interrupt, whatever it may be. That would bring us back to the website link that's built in. I think that makes sense to look at the program overview of the AB 109 capacity building project. So is that possible, Kimmy, to pull up that link now? If I'm looking at the first page of our agenda packet, it's in that first page. You got it. Thank you. So this is our own county model, and this was, I think, the concept of it being less building the overall capacity of the organizations to provide the services. Although, to a certain extent, I think that's the case. More so providing the orgs with the assistance that they need to obtain funding themselves. That's a very short reduction of what I'd say is like a first level of, we were thinking in our group of being larger in scope of, let's build your capacity org to actually have the services in place that you could provide what's needed. And let's help you get the technical know-how so you can be out there and getting contracts and grants. Whereas I think more the existing AB 109 capacity model is looking at providing that technical assistance, but not really getting the services of the org itself robust and off the ground. But that's my just initial summary of, and thinking our best way to move forward with the time that we have. Let me suggest that we would look at these bullet points and knowing that knowing that the question isn't exactly the same overlap with what we're dealing with here kind of will give us a chance to think in concepts, I suppose, of potential areas for organizational development support include personnel volunteers leadership, fiscal management, sustainability, planning and evaluation, building and managing external relations, and organizational structure and operations. And I'll also say, frankly, I'm not sure that this is the most productive way for us to be addressing this question, but I'm taking it on as we are, and we'll see if others have thoughts to add. That are those covering all the areas that we would want to be in terms of if we're going to be providing organizational development support. Are there parts of what we have in mind that are really missing here? Feel like, well, obviously we ought to have this component and that's not there. Or is this sufficiently broad? I mean, if I'm going to say personnel, volunteers, leadership, you could put a lot into those portions. Maybe I'll say that it sounds a little bit to me, and this isn't, part of it depends on, well, what's the audience of this document that we're looking at, this summary? I mean, is it supposed to be more accessible or not? I guess I'd say it sounds a little bit more sterile isn't the word, corporate-y kind of sounding for what we're having in mind with this, but it's also or business, not corporate, but like kind of your technical sound rather than, hey, maybe you're not familiar with this sort of structure and funding, but we want to reach out to you and make sure that you're going to be able to participate in this process. So I guess what I'm saying is a little bit less of managing external relations and some other framing of it that it has that'll resonate with the orgs that we want to have participating. I feel like I'm saying a lot of words and I'm not sure of how much of it is actually getting us to the next step. So that's my feedback, is that if I look at potential areas for organizational development support, if I'm putting together my bullet points, I don't know if I would phrase them this way. Maybe I would be saying, trauma-informed training, some sort of awareness related to the factors that are going to be providing services in community. That's the kind of mind that I'm having, or there being the client-centered advocacy concept of we're really wanting to help people best go out to community and reach the persons that are most directly impacted by criminal justice system, so that we can have reduced harms from that system. So that's kind of like what I'm having in mind, something that's sounding more in terms of your organization's ability to provide the sorts of services that our community wants and needs and is missing. And I don't know exactly what that language sounds like and what those bullet points would be, but that's kind of where I'm coming from in this discussion. Marcus?
So, Jeff, I think that goes to the section on who can participate or who it's targeted towards. I believe that this section that we're looking at now, what is it, is sort of a descriptor of the potential for what these organizations can get out of it. Whereas I believe, and maybe I'm not comprehending so well at the moment, but what you're articulating seems to be more of the organizations we're trying to reach, right? We want organizations who are who have this focus and who have this programmatic view, or that provide these services and this focus to these members of our community. Maybe. So I would look at the other two tabs as well.
Yeah, good point. And right, I do think that it may be both, in the sense that perhaps there are orgs that aren't really thinking of it as being their focus, but they can be receiving this funding and training, but that would be part of that's embedded in it, even if that's not really considered to be, the org doesn't see it as that's not our strong suit currently. But also, this may already be covered in these separate sections or better fitting into them. And I'm looking at that last bullet point in the list below, or the step below, and talking of identifying and implementing evidence-based practices, right? So that what I was talking about just before of, let's really make sure we're having, what is it? ACT, I think, was the model that I was lacking the words for, but the concept of going out in community and providing service to the person, to that last bullet point area, or the responsivity principle, which I'll confess, I don't really have a firm grasp of what that means to me, but responsive to the needs of those you're providing service to, or need to be providing service to. Right, these are looking at the language there at the top, and it's kind of up the top of the second set of bullet points, kind of consistent with the concept I was talking before of more providing education on how orgs will learn to do this, but not necessarily the degree of support to get them there. Not sure. It says here, participating orgs have the opportunity to enhance their reentry service delivery abilities by gaining an improved understanding of topics such as, right? So falling within those, the 2-day full group training, ongoing community learning environment, which would probably be a big piece of what is that cohort exactly and how robust and who would be steering that, and right, what would that look like? Because there could be a lot perhaps to that community learning environment and no less than 20 hours of personalized assistance. So, right, I suppose it's kind of how you interpret it and whether we would look at language just like this and say, you know, we can fit our ideas into this, or whether we might want to spell a few things out a little bit more to make sure we're making clear what sort of evidence-based practices or what sort of responsivity are we thinking of really in this particular space if we're going to be having it come out of the oversight body. We've got about 8 minutes remaining. I'm sensitive to my doing lots of talking and wanting to invite others to join. Marcus, I thought that was excellent to hear your take on this too, in terms of how we're looking at this. Anyone else want to share thoughts of, we're only going to capture so much today, but kind of influencing the discussion that we have as we're moving forward in this project, because wherever this subcommittee and the oversight body does land in its receiving staffing, right? If it's not going to be, if it won't be ORJ moving forward and in this new office or somewhere else, we're going to need to be presenting something that's at least in its sort of infancy to that next stage to say, this is where we are with it right now. And we've been kind of plateaued for a while we're at this 2-phase program, as I was describing before in the 1-page guidelines. How are we going to spell this out a little bit more of what do we think that first phase will be? And what is that second phase going to be, so that we're not completely stagnant as we now get the technical assistance and say, we're at this 1-pager. We want to kind of develop this maybe into a more of a structure that can move to the bigger PFR. RFP, not PFR. I was thinking of petition for review, other legal things. Amy, I see your hand.
Yeah, so again, I feel like I always need to start with an apology that I'm coming into this midstream or late stream or whatever. One thing that strikes me as I'm reading this second set of bullets is if the purpose is to engage organizations that just might not have the capacity, that's one thing. If it's to also bring in, like, I would maintain that what works in the criminal justice system at large, or what exists, isn't terribly effective, right? I think given, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if the purpose is to recognize that there is expertise in the community and there are different ways of doing things that might be effective, but have not had the opportunity to develop an evidence base because they don't have the resources, or because they haven't been able to work through the complicated county processes to get funding for it, then my concern is that this second set of bullets reads more like, and this is an oversimplification, but we're going to indoctrinate you to the way that we do things and then let you participate, as opposed to, we want to bring in new approaches and hear other ideas as well. So I might be oversimplifying. I also might be completely missing the point, but that's kind of how I react to the second set of bullet points.
Thank you, Amy. That's welcome feedback. And right, we take it as these are different factors that'll shape our way that we're moving forward. So what I'm hearing you're saying about that second set is kind of the power dynamic or the concept of this organization, we have the knowledge and the power to give to you, Oregon, you'll learn from us, and really not having that shared awareness of there is going to be knowledge sharing. There's parts of the county or the whoever's administering this process, the persons that are administering the process have a lot to learn from what's already out there. And so, yes, I think that for our spirit and how we're going to be addressing all this, and remembering this is not a correction, it's just centering our conversation that this is a different model than what we're actually doing, and it's influencing what we'll ultimately do. But right, receiving that and saying, getting that sense from those bullet points, and how might we take a different approach if we want to have a more collaborative or egalitarian. I'm looking for the right word, but kind of being in a shared mindset rather than hierarchical. Jill, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was just trying to look back and see what was the date that this was done. Trying to look back. This capacity building was done. How many? 2019, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So since then, the ORJ with Denise has created a different sort of structure, and it goes with the contracting. And it's about taking those organizations that might be already working in the community who aren't evidence-based, as we call it, and providing them a database to go look and see the services that they're providing, and see how their program can be adapted so that we can track outcomes and all the rest, and providing them capacity building and supports to help them understand and sort of work with them. And so I think it's a little bit different than this was 3 years ago. It's more of what Amy's talking about. Like, we know we don't have all the answers. We know the community is doing things really well. You may not fit into the typical EBP model, but perhaps we can find a way that your program matches an EBP model and work with you to help facilitate that. So it's not changing the way that they do things per se, if they have a method that's working, but it's more about us being able to track metrics to make sure that the public funds are being expended in a way that is benefiting the community. So, I think looking at this is great. I think it really, when you're talking about capacity building, what is your goal? And if your goal is to get different ideas and different organizations into the county to do this work, that may be something to look at, how we did capacity building in that way, or are doing capacity building in that way, versus this, which was a little bit, it was a different kind of a process. Oh, and I just did want to say that the RJOB is going to be housed somewhere else other than ORJ in the future. It's still being determined. It's being discussed at the Internal Operations Committee of the Board of Supervisors to find the best support structure, because the ORJ is not able to support the RJOB and all that they need to do, data analysis being the prime stumbling block. So there will be a future home for RJOB.
Thanks, Jill. And we've just got this 1 minute left, so let me invite Cheryl to take that comment, and we'll close.
All right, just 30 seconds. In conjunction with what Jill said, and Amy, both of you are I agree with both of you in that sense. I will just say, as somebody who deals with procurement every day, that's what we talked about early on, and I hope that you all remember this, is that capacity building also has to do with what you are not able to do, right? Because this is more than just having the good intentions and being able to do the things for the community on that end, but it's the paperwork. It's being able to put in the grant paperwork the way that it has to be done, dotting your I's and crossing your T's, and having the number of personnel to actually get the work done in the way it needs to get done. And that is what we heard from a lot of the NPAs, is that they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to respond to grants. They don't know how to respond to RFPs and solicitations in a way that they can get it awarded. So this is not necessarily that maybe the community doesn't know, but they don't know what they don't know. And I say that as somebody who's responding right now to a community member who is not awarded a contract and who is upset about it because they think that they're supposed to be awarded a contract simply because they're a minority-owned business. And I have to break the news from them that that's just not enough. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's, and you got to respond to what the RFP is asking for. And as a compliance officer, as a procurement officer, I have to do these more often than I wish I had to, but it's because people don't know what they don't know. So capacity building has to be building people up with those nuts and bolts that other big companies have, because they have a person like me from the inside who knows how to write it. So there's the part. So while you might have the heart and soul and the compassion and the intent, you don't have the dotted I's and crossed T's, the technical skills. That's it.
And just to jump on what Cheryl just said, and that is part of what the ORJ did with their most recent project. They helped them through the RFP process step by step to help them understand it. Absolutely agreed that everywhere, all these small community-based organizations and otherwise nonprofits do need a lot of help with grant writing for sure.
And we'll leave it there. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you everyone for being part of the meeting today. Always more to do, and we'll continue doing it. This next meeting is going to be August 11th, same time. Until then, be well and we'll be in contact. Bye-bye.